Hi, I'm Pete Bremy of Vanilla Fudge, and you're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. You know, a lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for people mostly over 50 who want to learn to play the bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. ForBassPlayersOnly.com, this is the place to learn bass. We've got a great guest this week. Pete Bremy, born in Paterson, New Jersey, has had kind of an on-again, off-again experience with the bass and with music and the music world, which I'm definitely going to ask him about. Fortunately, he's been on again for quite some time. Pete managed to get himself in the whole Vanilla Fudge, Cactus, Vince Martell world in a pretty interesting way. And by now he's got a lot of history with all those acts. Welcome back, Pete. It's so great to see you.
It's great to be here. So good to see you again, John.
Thank you. Did I pronounce your name right? Pete Bremy is what I meant to say.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Well, you got it.
Shouldn't question myself. We did an interview on For Bass Players Only, which was published actually, believe it or not, April 28th, 2014.
It's like 9 years ago. Wow. I guess a lot's happened since then.
Well, I do want to back up, though. I certainly want to know what's happening now and what's keeping you busy. But in case anybody in our audience missed that interview in 2014, or if they don't remember, would you mind retelling that story? You started on drums, you discovered the bass, you played bass for a while, then you took a little break for 20 years, and then you got back into it. You'd always loved Tim Bogert and Vanilla Fudge and Cactus, and you got into that world. Can you retell that story for our audience?
Sure. How much time have we got?
Well, give us the abridged version. I feel like I just told the whole story, so fill in the pertinent gap.
Okay. I'm fairly typical. I started on drums because of Ringo, me and 20,000 other guys and girls. And played drums for a while as a kid, and I got pretty good actually. But I got tired of just pounding things. I wanted to make some music, so I decided I wanted to learn guitar. But my best friend at the time, Jeff, said, "We have enough guitar players. Why don't you learn to play bass?" And I think that's what they said to Paul McCartney too, if I'm not mistaken. But so I said, okay. I said, bass, what's that? I don't even know what it is. He says, well, it's like a guitar, but it only has 4 strings instead of 6, and you only have to play 1 note at a time. I said, okay, that's for me. So my next birthday, some months later or whatever, my parents, we're talking, I was like 13. That's how old I was. I was young. So my parents bought me my first bass, which was a Hagstrom 2. It was with a white enamel on it. Which was a great little bass, actually. I wish I still had it, but it was stolen. And I learned to play, and then there was me and my best friend and my other friend Ed, who also was a guitarist. He was a rhythm guitarist, and we answered an ad with 2 brothers that played drums and keyboards, and we formed a 5-piece band that became very popular in high school and CYO, the typical 60s, non-club circuit. We were all too young to play clubs at that point in time.
Was that Heaven's Sunday?
Yes, that was Heaven Sunday, correct. And we were together for quite a few years, actually. We did branch into clubs later on. Well, we broke up for a couple of months here at a time. We'd fight with each other, and then we'd always get back together again. But we were all over time, right? Probably together 6 or 7 years.
What about the brothers? Were they in each other's faces a lot because they were brothers?
No, I don't think so. They disagreed once in a while, but no, I don't think so. I think where we butted heads more often was the musical direction of the band. We were I was more into rock and straight ahead rock, and so the brothers. One of the brothers was kind of into folky avant-garde stuff. The Mothers of Invention type thing, and that wasn't really for me. I respect it, of course, but I was more into straight ahead rock. I mean, obviously Fudge, Cactus, stuff like that. Led Zeppelin later on, but yeah, I'm a rocker at heart. What can I say? And so then, actually, that the people moved away. That band finally broke up, and I actually ended up going back to drums. I was my one friend and Ed, who I was the rhythm guitarist. He decided he didn't really want to make it on guitar, and so he took up bass also, and he had a band. Trying to make this quick, they lost their drummer. They had a bunch of some club gigs. So I went back on drums and I said, I'll sub for you, until you get a drummer again. And I'd had a big reel-to-reel tape of one of their live shows. I put it on my machine. I learned all their songs. We played through their whole set, and they said, okay, you're our drummer. So I went back to drums for a while, for a couple of years. And but after that, as I think I mentioned in the first interview, was I discovered that the agents were just completely ripping us off, and the club scene at that time, the money was going down, expenses were getting higher, talking in the mid 70s. Disco was coming in, wasn't particularly thrilled with that. So putting all those things together, when I finally caught this agent ripping us off, I said I had enough, and I wanted to make a little bit more money, and there just wasn't money to be made at that point. Whether I wasn't good enough, I don't know. But so I did get out of the music business for quite a few years. Got a job, got married, had kids, and
the twin boys, right?
Yep, twin sons. They're 32 now, Adam and Matt. Neither one of them really. They started taking some music lessons, but they gave it up after a couple of years. Adam started on piano, and actually his piano is right behind me here. And Matt started on guitar. He still has a couple of guitars. He picks on them once in a while, but he hasn't really done anything with it. He's super busy now with his job and his family. He has 2 little ones.
What kind of job did you have? What were you doing?
I got a job in the printing industry. I was working in a business forms manufacturing plant, and I worked my way up I was in the business close to, I was working the day job for a while I was still in music to just make some extra money before I quit music. I was already in it a little bit. And then I worked my way up. I worked for a couple of different companies, but in the last company I worked for, I was actually general manager. And I started touring with the Fudge while I was still general manager of that company. I was subbing then for Tim Bogert. I wasn't an actual member then, but I subbed for him for a few months. And I was doing it on vacation time. And I ran out of vacation time, and they had to get someone else. And they actually got T.M. Stevens to replace me as Tim's, believe it or not.
Last time we were on a bus from Markneukirchen, Germany to Frankfurt.
Uh-huh.
That was a whole story in itself because the bus driver fell asleep. This was a bass that Warwick had put on. So
right.
Autobahn like 3:00 in the morning, and that was a whole big thing. Who was it? Alfonso Johnson and Stu Ham, and I was sitting between Ed Friedland and Victor Wooten, and what's on there? They said the only one that wasn't there was Lee Sklar because he couldn't make that trip. So,
okay.
Not that he doesn't have enough work, but he would have had like all the work in the world because if the bus had not, if we hadn't all survived the way we fortunately did. Divinity Rocks. David Ellefson from Megadeth happened to be in the front seat, and he's the one that saved us because he ran over. He stood up and grabbed the wheel of the bus. And,
wow.
Yeah. That
could have been a huge musical tragedy there. My God.
It sure could have been. But I digress. That was the last day. T.M. Stevens was on the bus at that time, too. So I haven't seen him since. Anyway, I digress. So he was in Vanilla Fudge, right? Is that
for a while. Yep. For a while. And then Tim Bogert finally came back. That was in the mid 2000s. Tim came back around 2004, I think. I started subbing in 2002. And Tim came back around 2004, I believe.
Well, how
and
did
he
you
would.
get into that world? Because I know that was, I think that blew your mind. You said it was like a dream come true because you had
Oh,
loved
oh
those
God,
guys.
yes. Oh God, yes. The Vanilla Fudge was my favorite band. I mean, I started out with the Beatles, but Vanilla Fudge was the first band that I'd ever saw really live, other than a local high school band, dance band. But I got to see them on the day before their first album was released at a place here in near not too far from where I lived when I was a kid, and they were a lot of famous bands would go there on weeknights and do like bill payer gigs, in between the major shows. And this was an outdoor public picnic area with a swimming pool and picnic tables, and they had a pavilion, and they would bring in acts like the Doors were there. Linda Ronstadt with the Stone Ponies were there. The Lovin' Spoonful, the Critters, the Circle, if you remember the Circle,
Red Rubber Ball.
Red Rubber Ball. Yeah, they all played there.
Excuse me, this would have been around what year?
This was 1967, summer of 1967, and so I went to see them, and absolutely and totally blown away. Their first album came out in August of '67, and also so did Sgt. Pepper's. And I had all Beatle albums previous to that, and I only had enough money to buy one album, and I bought the Vanilla Fudge album, and the Sgt. Pepper stayed in the rack for a long time, actually, because I was so blown away by it, and I learned to play. I played drums to it. I played bass to it. I never really got good on guitar. I have very fat fingers. Definitely have bass player hands. I've been told that a million times. I discovered this is where I also discovered the Hammond organ, which is also a favorite instrument of mine. I play a little bit of keys too, and it turns out my dad had a Hammond Spinet, an old Model M, and I started picking away at that, taking the album and going from 33 down to 16. He had a variable speed turntable, so I could actually go literally at half speed and tune it and start picking out Mark Stein's notes at half speed and transposing it up an octave or so, whatever, a lot of his stuff. And I learned to play that.
I remember 16, boy, you that's going way back.
Oh yeah. And it wasn't quite exactly half speed, because it's 33 and a third. 16 was on, so I had to slightly tune it. It was variable speed all the way through, so I could tune the turntable to an octave below.
You know what?
Slowed it down.
When I was learning guitar, I played guitar for quite a while before I played bass. And, similar story to you and the 800 other bass players that I've interviewed. Well, a few of them went straight to bass. But I didn't know till I got into college that my turntable was a half step off. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
So I was learning and jamming along, playing all these rock tunes in A flat and E flat, and I didn't think anything of it. Then I got into the orchestra in college, and I'm playing along with the symphony. I'm like, whoa, so the record was playing like too fast or too slow. I don't know, but that's how I all those years, and I never thought anything about it. So you discovered Vanilla Fudge, you really loved their music, and someone did that, and later on you got the gig. How did that happen? That's amazing.
Okay, well, I thought, all right, I'm trying to give you the nickel tour. I mean, they broke up in 1970. I mean, I went to see them dozens of times. I saw them at the Fillmore East in New York City a couple times, and they played they played colleges and even high school, believe it or not, high school concerts, believe it. And so I saw them many times. They broke up. I followed their individual careers, Carmine with Rod Stewart and with Cactus, and then finally with Jeff Beck, and Mark Stein with Timmy Bogert, also with Carmine with a couple of those bands too, and Mark Stein with Alice Cooper and Tommy Bolin. And so And they reunited in '84, made the Mystery album. And when I had heard that they were getting back, I saw an interview with Mark Stein in Keyboard Magazine, and that they were back together, and I was flipping out, of course. And I called Atlantic Records, and I got in touch with one of their executives, and we were on a first name basis. When's this album coming out? He laughed when I called. He would talk to me. Yeah, it was pretty cool, because I was so anxious for this album to come out. But unfortunately, it never went anywhere, and that was through no fault of the music quality. They were actually involved in a legal battle at the time, and the album never got promoted. That was the Mystery album in 1984. They reunited again in '87. I went to a couple of their concerts as they toured New York City. I went to 2 shows there. But I never met the guys. Never met them. I never had the opportunity to meet them until 1997. The internet was brand new, and I was surfing the web one time, and I said, let me just put in Vanilla Fudge, and this beautiful website came up for Vanilla Fudge. It was a fan site. It wasn't endorsed by the band. It was by a guy named the webmaster was Casey Butler. He lived out in Las Vegas. I live in New Jersey, and I communicated with him, told him what a big fan I was, and we became pen pals. And I was actually big dabbling in websites myself, very primitive.
You became key pals.
Key pals, yes, key pals. I stand corrected.
No, my son had that when he was a kid. He was like in 6th grade. He had a key pal named James in like Australia. I'm sorry to interrupt. This is a great story.
That's okay. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, interrupt any time with that. But now where was I? Oh, yes, we became key pals, and I was actually starting to dabble in websites a little bit, very amateurishly. And for a club that I belonged to, they wanted me to try to make a website for them. And so that Casey thought that it would be fun to have someone work on this website with him. So he started giving me, I mean, he was excellent. Rest in peace, he passed away a few years ago, sadly. But he gave me little tidbits of things to do and stuff. And then he wanted to create websites for the individual members. And he let me create Tim Bogert's website. And that website is still up today. So since 1997. And it's hasn't changed much, because all the technology advanced way ahead of me, that I would have had to start taking college courses to keep up with it. And I was, working, raising a family, and playing music. I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. But I still did the best I could. And then Casey found religion and decided he was moving on to do religious websites. And he resigned, and I became the webmaster of Vanilla Fudge. But back in 2005. But I should back up. How did I meet them? That was the question. During that first year, one by one, the guys in the Fudge came online and discovered the website. And Casey, but the guys weren't even talking to each other really at the time. They were not together as a band, so they weren't really in touch. But Casey put them all together and got them to declare it their official Vanilla Fudge website. So now it was official. And through the website, I learned that Vinnie Martell only lived about a half an hour from me. So I was able to get in contact with him, and I met him. He actually, for a friend of his, he did a solo coffee house gig not too far from my house. I went and I met him. We hit it off, became friends, and he learned I was a musician. We jammed together, and I was playing bass, and he liked the way I played bass, and he was putting a solo project together, and he asked me to be his bass player. So that's how I got started with Vinny. And then the Fudge got back together in '98 to do a gig in Japan, but without Mark Stein. It was Vinny, Carmine, Timmy, and Bill Pascali was going to be the keyboard player, because Mark wasn't interested at the time wasn't interested in doing that gig. So they decided to rehearse on Long Island, not too far from me. So Vinny invited me out, and I finally got to meet Timmy. Even after doing his website, I'd spoken to Timmy on the phone a number of times, because he discovered that website, and he was thrilled that somebody did one for him. So he made that his official website too. That's how Timmy and I became friends. I finally got to meet him, and they did that show, and then they decided to get back together again, and again in 2002 they took a couple of years off, I think, and then in 2002 they decided to go back on tour, and they were starting out. You probably heard of the Stone, Bruce Springsteen, the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, New Jersey. I think everybody's heard of the Stone Pony. That was their first gig. Then they had a gig down in Virginia, and then back up to BB King's in New York City. And by that time, the mother of my kids, my ex-wife and I at the time, had become social friends with Vinny and his wife Peg. So we decided we were going to go along on that and follow the band and just get for a weekend getaway, because we had the twins and they were a handful. So we need a weekend getaway, cart the kids off to my mother-in-law, and we were going to follow the band. They would comp us tickets, and we'd stay at the same hotel as them. So we were all set. It was a Friday, Saturday, Monday deal. Then the day before, I was still working in the office at the time. We were supposed to leave on Friday. I'd taken Friday off, but late Thursday afternoon, I got a phone call, and the receptionist called me and says, "Hey, Pete, there's a Carmine on the phone for you." But Carmine, I mean, I had only met Carmine Appice like twice, I think, by this time. And so I say hello, and goes, "Hey, Pete, this is Carmine." He says, "I'm a pretty good detective, huh? We found you." I said, "Yeah, Carmine," and it was like a shock. And he proceeded to tell me that Tim had come down with pneumonia, and he was in the hospital, and that Vinny had told him I knew all the Fudge material from back in the day, and that I could take his place. So they came to my house that night.
Who came?
The whole band came to my house because they were from out of town. I don't know if you can see behind me over my shoulder. There's a Hammond B3 behind me over here, and there's a drum kit over my other shoulder. And I, of course, have a bass rig. This is my studio family room. And they all came over, and we had about 2-hour audition / rehearsal that ended about midnight or so. And they hubbubbed in the corner for a while, and Carmine comes over to me and says, "I think this is going to work." So
what else could they do if it didn't work? What would they have done?
What would they have done? Right. And so the only thing different that changed, I brought my bass with me, and they picked up the tab for our hotel room. And because I was already going anyway. So how about that? That's like the amazing part of that story. I was already going anyway. But now I went as a sub for the band, and it all happened so fast. It was like, did that really happen? And Timmy was sick for a while, so I got to tour for a number of months. They did like sporadic gigs, and sometimes they went from place to place with days off, and they would spend the money and fly me out, fly me back, fly me out, fly me back, so I wouldn't waste all the vacation time and stuff just traveling around. And finally, I went to Scandinavia with them, California, Washington State, Ohio, toured all around with them for about 6 months on and off. And then I finally ran out of vacation time, and then Tim Stevens took over. But when Tim came back, they actually hired me. I was Tim's bass tech. I was Mark's keyboard tech. And I was also their tour manager for a year in 2006, I believe it was, or 2007. 2007, I think it was. And so I became pretty good friends with them then. And then I think 2008 and 9, they pretty much took off. But in 2009, Timmy decided he'd had enough. He couldn't do the traveling anymore. He had still residual aches and pains. He had a pretty serious motorcycle accident a couple of years before.
It's really
he just couldn't do the traveling anymore. So he was done. He just said he was done, and they were off for another year, I think. And finally, in 2010, Carmine picked up a gig, and they called me up, and that was 2010. I've been with them ever since.
What an
So, and it is a dream gig for me. It is a dream gig for me,
incredible sequence of events. I was
isn't it?
listening to some Vanilla Fudge this morning, just getting in the mood for the interview, and I
Mm-hmm.
how much of a cover band they really were, as opposed to having a lot of originals. Keep Me Hanging,
Mm-hmm.
obviously their big hit, and they did their own versions of Ticket to Ride, The Look of Love, Season of the Witch,
Mm-hmm.
Shotgun. I mean, they were all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
It,
They definitely their formula was taking songs that the lyrics didn't fit the music, and they wanted to rearrange it to make it more um, applicable, shall we say. I mean, the biggest example is You Keep Me Hanging On. Um, it was the lyrics were hurting. This guy breaks up with the girl. He wants to keep her hanging on, and still want to be just friends, and or she's heartbroken and stuff. Yet the song is happy. Set me free, why don't you, babe? It's bouncy and boppy and poppy and stuff. And they said, no, this is a great song, but these lyrics are hurting. It needs to be slowed down. And also, the original is in the key of E major. They changed it to E minor to make it sad. So they just made it their own, and obviously, it was a success because because I read an interview with Holland Dozier Holland, and the Fudge version was actually their favorite out of the number of covers. The people that had covered it, the Fudge version was their favorite. So. Yeah. So and they applied the same formula to a lot of the other songs too.
That's interesting. Tim's bass playing. There's one tune. It's called "Take Me for a Little While."
Oh, my favorite.
He sounds like James Jamerson on that record.
To me, he sounds like a cross between James Jamerson and Paul McCartney on it. So he's got Jamerson's feel and stuff, but then he's got a lot of McCartney's melody bass in there as well. I think that's my favorite song to play. I cover him fairly closely on that. I don't play note for note what Tim does, but there are certain passages of certain songs you kind of have to, because they all the instruments are arranged together. So you kind of have to play the same thing over and over again. But Take Me for a Little While was just amazing. And it's got to be like one of the first bass solos too. He's got that little solo in the middle there, which I could be wrong, but I have researched. I can't really find a rock bass solo prior to that. Are you aware of any?
I don't know. Maybe John Entwistle or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, possibly, yeah. John Entwistle, yeah. The Who came first. But very, very few, and how it fit that particular song, because it's not even a really super hard rock song. It's kind of a rock ballad, really. What a great but Tim, as crazy as he was, later on, his bass parts for Vanilla Fudge are mostly orchestral. They're very orchestral, almost as what a bass viol would play. Very melodic, very supportive, but very, very melodic. And uses the entire range of the neck, top to bottom. And
that can get someone into trouble if they don't know what they're doing. But he obviously,
yeah. I know. A lot of people say, stay down the bottom, keep the groove down the bottom and stuff like that. But I do ascribe to Tim's way of thinking. I think there are times when, within reason, that the bass can do different things. It doesn't have to. It depends on the song. I mean, we've heard it a million
Dance
times.
with Me by Orleans. Dance with Me way up there, but it's funny. I used to do a duo gig with some old lady, And when I lived in Miami, it was in Coconut Grove. It was at the Grand Bay Hotel, some big fancy hotel. And I was playing upright bass, and she was playing.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'd get up to a D or, God forbid, an E up on the G string, she would turn around and she'd say, "Hey, you're a bass player. Get that where you belong."
Well, on the electric bass, my question is, well, if you're not supposed to use them, why did they put frets there? There are frets there.
That's like saying if you're not supposed to go over 55, why does the car go to 90?
Yeah. Well, that too. But
I want to touch. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I play to the song. There are songs where, yes, you want to stay down the bottom end and groove, and the Fudge Shotgun is a prime example of that. That's a solid groove song straight all the way through it, and you stay in the groove with the drums and the rhythm section. But like Take Me for a Little While, the bass is what really backs up the melody of the song. Mark is playing a little diddly thing there, but the bass, it's just the bass really, and he did such a fantastic job with that, I think. And but that's all over the neck too. And People Get Ready is another one. The whole first half of the song, the whole half of the intro of the song, I should say, is above the octave. All the lines are all above the octave, above the 12th fret there. So
I want to touch on something that you said earlier about how you kind of almost like pay homage to what he played, but you may take some liberties if it's appropriate. I've interviewed over 800 bass players.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking over. When I interviewed Victor Bailey, he took over for Jocko in Weather Report.
Mm-hmm.
When I interviewed Matt Bissonette, who's playing with Elton John, and I said, "So what about those lines? Gene Murray, man, one of my favorite bass players." He says, "Elton just said, hey, do what you want." Or Bob Lysick from playing with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, right? And he says, like California Girls. What else are you gonna do with that? Do 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 do. I'm not gonna do anything else than that. So a lot of times it's you gotta do it that way. Other times you have some opportunity to just be yourself and give the music what it needs. So interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, though, like I said, there are specific parts that really need to be repeated. I think, but other times I try to play it, and well, also to play with Vanilla Fudge today, none of them really play like they used to. They've all matured, all of them. Carmine has matured on the drums. He's not as crazy as he used to be. Mark Stein is now he was, if you remember, if you're familiar with his style back then, in the old days, he was almost pretty much a one-handed keyboard player. He was waving and playing like he wanted to, because, he's told me that he was frustrated because, guitar players can dance around and, perform, but keyboard players, they're stuck there. They can't move, especially with behind 500 pounds of furniture, So he wanted to perform. So he did a lot of one-handed stuff. But now, I mean, he's into Jimmy Smith. Mark is doing left-handed bass and stuff and the bluesy stuff. Whenever he's like amazing. Mark Stein is just an amazing keyboard player. And Vinny, his guitar playing stuff, they've all matured. And I think they're more powerful, but they're not as wild as they used to be. So, and Timmy wasn't either at the end of his career, because I got to see him play live a lot. He would do his solos where, he'd be featured out front by himself and do his crazy solos, but actually performing with the band, he was a lot more tempered than he used to be in the old days in his 20s when they were a bunch of crazy kids. So I tend to play more to fit the way the band is now. Don't get me wrong, we rock out. The band still definitely rocks out. I still love playing with this band. I mean, we play our hearts out. We take showers when the shows are over because we're definitely, for a bunch of old guys, still rocking out. But
I met Tim at a NAMM show once, and he was a mellow, laid back, quiet, easy-going guy on the outside anyway. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. He was a sweetheart. Timmy was a sweetheart. Rest his soul.
I
We
am
miss him. We all miss him.
an interview with him on For Bass Players Only. So I'm glad I got
Mhm.
that. Thank goodness we have all those recordings.
Yes.
Hey, I want to ask you about Cactus. What is
Okay.
Cactus? Is it kind of an offshoot from Vanilla Fudge? And it had something to do with Jeff Beck, I think, because he wasn't available and then he was available. What is Cactus from Vanilla Fudge? Can you connect those dots for me?
Sure. And I certainly can. Um, Jeff Beck started getting connected with Vanilla Fudge, believe it or not, because of a Coca-Cola commercial. Vanilla Fudge recorded 2 Coca-Cola commercials, and when they were in the studio, Vinny got deathly sick with the flu. And Jeff Beck just happened to be in the studio, and that's where they met him. And Jeff Beck actually, you can probably on YouTube if you wanted to hear them, Vanilla Fudge Coca-Cola commercials, and Jeff Beck actually recorded the Coca-Cola commercials. So you could add to that if you hear Vanilla Fudge Coke, that's Jeff Beck playing guitar.
60s, I'm guessing, or what?
Yeah, probably late 60s. The band started 67, so I'm probably guessing around 68, 69. And Jeff Beck was kind of blown away by Timmy and Carmine, and they met up again, I think, at the Singer Bowl, and so I forget who it was, but somebody was talking to Jeff Beck, and they came back and they told Timmy, he said, Jeff Beck told me he really wants to work with you guys so that's when Timmy and Carmine decided to break up Vanilla Fudge, and so they were making plans to start this band, and they were going to call it Cactus, and they were going to have Rod Stewart as the lead singer. That would have been one heck of a band. Jeff Beck, Rod Stewart, and Timmy and Carmine. Woof. But what happened was Jeff Beck got in a bad car accident, and he was out of commission for well over a year. And Timmy and Carmine just couldn't wait. They had to get to work. So they formed Cactus, and they got Jim McCarty of Buddy Miles and Mitch Ryder in the Detroit Wheels fame. And then they got, and Rod Stewart changed his mind. I don't really know why. It could be because I think his solo career was starting to take off there a little bit. He could be on his own at that point, maybe. But and regardless of what the reason was, he had decided he didn't want to do it. So then they got Rusty Day from Journey to the Center of the Mind. Amboy Dukes. Thank you, Amboy Dukes, from the Amboy Dukes, to be their singer. And that turned out to be one heck of a band too. And they were together in various incarnations. They put about 4 or 5 albums out, and Jim McCarty left after the first 3 albums, I think, and he and Timmy didn't get along very well, and he left, and then they got Werner Fritzjings to come in on guitar, and the keyboard player. Got a keyboard player. I'm terrible with names anymore. Oh my gosh, I'm definitely getting old. Dwayne Hitchings came in on keyboards, and then it finally broke up, and then Rusty Dave created a band called Son of Cactus with a whole bunch of new players and stuff like that. But Carmine and Tim left when Jeff Beck came back, because then Jeff Beck reapproached Timmy and Carmine, and that's when they did Beck Bogert Appice.
Yep.
And they did that one album.
I have it.
You have it? Yeah, I have it too. Now I have every album that any of those guys did, I think. Every album. And so that led on to Beck Bogert Appice.
I used to go down the street from Mitch Ryder, by the way.
Who did?
I did.
Oh, you did? From Mitch Ryder? Oh, wow. How cool. Are you out in the Detroit area?
I grew up just outside Detroit, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, Jim McCarty is out there too, You must, he plays all the time out there. You must be aware of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, my dad was a rock and roll DJ in the 50s and 60s in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And he moved to Detroit right in the middle of the school year. It was 4 days before I turned 7. because
Mm-hmm.
a morning show on
Mm-hmm.
radio. But yeah, when I was 6 years old, you would take us to see the Love and Spoonful, the Dave Clark Five, the Association, and I got to see the Beatles when I was 6 years old.
Oh,
I knew where I was. I knew who they were. I knew the music. It was a municipal stadium in Cleveland where the Browns played and the Indians played. And I will never forget that.
wow. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Jim, you should check him out. He's incredible. I love the way Jim McCarty plays guitar. He's so good. He's so good.
Iconic solo break in Devil with a Blue Dress. Good golly, Miss Molly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's all Jim.
Yeah.
That's all Jim.
What is keeping you busy these days, Pete?
What is keeping me busy these days? Well, I leave tomorrow to go on tour with the Fudge. We have 3 shows out in the Midwest. We're playing We're in Illinois and Wisconsin. We're playing Friday. We're playing the Wildey Theater in Edwardsville, Illinois. Then Saturday we're playing Summerfest in Milwaukee, and then Sunday we're playing the Arcada Theater in St. Charles. Then another thing that's very cool is in July, Vanilla Fudge is getting inducted into the Rock Gods Hall of Fame in Nashville, and I'm actually a part of it. I'm actually being inducted with the band. Timmy and I both. Timmy in memoriam is being inducted, but I'm told I'm a part of it too. I'm not just playing, and we're doing a dinner and concert and celebration show for that. I think Pat Travers is also being inducted as well, and I think someone else too, but whoever else escapes me. But that will be a lot of fun.
Congratulations, well deserved.
Thank you. And then we're doing a couple in July, a few shows in Ohio, the Kent Stage, which we've played before, and Ludlow Garage, that's a new one for us in Cincinnati. And then finally on the 30th, we're playing down by the Riverside in Rochester, Minnesota. And then we do have one more, and then we're back in North Carolina in August. So we have a bit to do.
Sounds like a fun summer.
And since we spoke last, I've recorded 2 albums with the Fudge. Spirit of 67 in 2015, which was they told us to pick top 100 hits from 1967. So we did a whole album of 1967 songs and fudgified them. And that was a thrill for me to actually see how they arranged, because, all the rest of the time we're just playing songs that already existed, but I got to see who contributes what, and they let me contribute ideas too, which I was really quite thrilled and surprised at, to be honest with you. But they did take a few of my ideas for and even one of the songs. But I can only remember what it is now. But one of the songs they let me, I'm sure I'll think of it in a minute. All right, go get the album and look at it, and have Carmine sing it, because Carmine always, oh my God, I'm getting senile in my old age. Because Carmine always used to sing at least one song on the album, and I picked a song that I thought that he should sing, and he ended up singing it, and we did it. It's Tracks of My Tears. I had the word tears, and I was getting tears on my pillow. But Tracks of My Tears, we did, and Carmine sang it, and that, which happened to be my idea, and a couple of little things adding in here. So it was really a thrill to see how my heroes actually came up with all these ideas. And then
Carmine, people say I'm the life of the party. That's the song, right?
Yep. That's right.
All right.
Yep.
Well, it's going to take me a minute to
and then we played at Sweden Rock the following year in 2016, and we recorded a live album there, and that's available out too, live at Sweden Rock. And I did check back to the previous interview, the write up of it, to see, that I didn't want to repeat myself and stuff. And with Cactus, I was still with Cactus back then. We were recording the album Black Dawn, which I was thrilled with. I love it. Which has since come out. I've since left Cactus, but so did Jim. I left when Jim McCarty left. He decided he couldn't do the traveling anymore either. He's got some physical ailments that prevented him from doing any serious traveling. So. But when he left, I decided to leave too. But we finished the album Black Dawn, and that's still available. So I'm on one, and we had a live Cactus album too. We played in Japan, and we have live in Japan. I think it's called One Night in Japan. So I 2 albums with Cactus, 2 albums with Vanilla Fudge, and we started. The last thing I thought that was kind of cool was, being friends with Timmy and both being bass players, I could never work with him really. So we never got a chance to work together. But we just before COVID, we got a record deal from an Australian record label. And they wanted us to record an album of Supreme songs because of You Keep Me Hanging On and stuff like that. So just before COVID, we started it. And we recorded Stop in the Name of Love. And then we had learned that Timmy had quite serious cancer. And it was very sad. We knew he didn't have that much time left. So the other guys, and I totally went along with it, they asked Timmy if he wanted to, play with the band one more time. So they took my bass track off, and Timmy went into the studio literally in his pajamas. He was not feeling well. He was quite sick, but he was able to go into the studio, and he laid down a bass track on top of it. So that's the last recording with all 4 original members of the Fudge in it. But the interesting part of it is I had already laid down background vocals, and my background vocals are still on it. So in a way, I got to finally work with Timmy, even if it was just singing. But still, I thought it was cool to be on that song. We then
Stop in the Name of Love.
Stop in the Name of Love. Yeah, it's out. It's available. That's on YouTube, and it's out. I think it's on Apple Music and Spotify and stuff. Yeah, we play it live as a tribute to Tim. We still play it live, but it was kind of cool for me to be on a recording with all 4 of them, and with Timmy too as well. So
I want to ask some bass stuff, because for Bass Players Only, as you know, is a bass instruction site.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the people that are coming to learn bass are men in their 50s, 60s, 70s. It's not the kids. It's not the career-bound people that want to go on the road or get a big gig or a tour. They just want to get together with their buddies and play some classic rock riffs or some blues shuffles or some, maybe a little walking bass, some funk R&B maybe. And it's not all men, but it's 91% male. And a lot of times what happens to us when we get into our 50s, 60s, 70s, things like arthritis and tendonitis and other things that creep into our bodies. So I'm just trying to set a context for you. So knowing who we serve here, for the most part, what advice can you impart to somebody like that who wants to learn to play bass? What do you think they should be thinking about? What do you think they should know?
Well, obviously, if you have arthritis, there's not much you can do about that, I suppose. I mean, there's treatments for the pain, but the dexterity can be a problem. I hate to admit it, but I think I'm starting to get a little bit in some of my knuckles, but fortunately it's not, knocking on wood, it's not affecting my playing yet. But I think I try to keep my hands warm. I wear gloves a lot when other people don't really need to. It's not freezing cold, but I try to keep my hands warm, and I do a lot of stretching exercises. But slowly, like that. A lot of these bending the fingers back, just to, gently, not painfully, just to try to, because that. I actually learned this from a drummer friend of mine, Tiger Bell Milligari. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He has a a drummer's website. We actually went to high school together, but he's played with a lot of people. He's more a jazz drummer, and he's like phenomenal chops. He's got like amazing chops, but he actually worked with a doctor, some type of specialist, to come up with exercises that would try to keep your hands limber, and these tendons to try to prevent tendonitis. And so, I mean, I do them when I'm watching television. Sometimes if I'm in the car sitting in traffic, I'll put my fingers on the steering wheel and do it this way, and it does help keep myself a little bit limber. And in my old age, I don't have the speed I used to have. I never was as fast as Tim Bogert. He could do with one finger what Victor Wooten does with two, and all the style like that. But I mean, there's actually videos of him playing, I think a song called Need Love, with the Fudge, with Need Love on I think it's the Merv Griffin show, I believe it or not. And he's playing these triplets, and you would swear he's double thing. And then they show a close up of his hand, and it's you see his hand going like this, and it's one finger, like freaking out. Anyway, but I digress. But so you don't have to be super chops to be a good bass player. I mean, you don't have to be Victor Wooten. We have all our idols, so don't have to be Tim Bogert. I never, even in my best days, could not play. So I don't try to be Timmy. I try to play more to the song and play within my capabilities. If you like country music and your hands are really arthritic, you can play root fifth, and there's lots of call for that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. So, I mean, if you want to, for guys our age and older, if you have arthritis, it might be a little rough to try to be Jocko, but or some of the amazing players of today with these amazing chops, which I find each generation takes it a step further. Whatever your hero is in their 20s and 30s. Now next month you find a 13-year-old playing what this one plays, and then he grows up, and then the next 12-year-old takes that. We keep expanding as the generations go on with the amount of chops and stuff. So I don't worry about it. I just don't worry about it. I mean, like I said, I'm 70 years old, and I'm still playing with Vanilla Fudge, and they still like the way I play. I mean, I'm in Tim Bogert's. I still have to shake my head when I say that. I'm in Tim Bogert's shoes, and yet I don't have the chops that he had, but people tell me I fit the band fine. So you don't.
What you're talking about comes up in pretty much every interview these days. These 13-year-old kids that do amazing stuff on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Not what people want in a bass player. They're more likely to want the 1-5-1-5 person.
Exactly. If I see one more Instagram video of a 15-year-old kid sitting on his bed just slapping away and all this stuff like that, yes, I can't do that. I will be the first one to admit I cannot do that. I'm sick of it. I want to let me see what can you do with the band, and I changed my attitude towards that about 15 years ago, thanks to Michael Tobias. When Bass Day, Bass Player Magazine Bass Day used to be in New York. Now it's I don't even know if they're still having it anymore.
The company was sold to Future.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. To the British company bought Bass Player, I think. But it was in New York for a while, and I was still, I was playing with the Fudge, but the Bass Day was loaded with all my bass heroes who I'd never met before. Oh my! Victor Wooten was there, Stanley Clarke, Will Lee, T.M. Stevens. I mean, Tal Wilkenfield was there. I mean, all these incredible bass players. And I'm going, Oh my God, and going from booth to booth to booth, and I'm not talking about them specifically, but all these other people coming in, going from it and seeing all these incredible chops players and stuff like that. And I walked up to Mike and I said, Mike, and I feel almost embarrassed. I can never play like that. And he looks at me and he takes a shot, puts a shot of whiskey because he's like, I can't listen to all this stuff. He goes, but can they play in a band? You play in a band. Do all these guys, are they just here, going to Guitar Center and plucking basses and showing off and their bedrooms and stuff and we're making videos and stuff, but do they play in bands? You play in a band, you've been with the band for a while now, and I said, you're right. I don't know, like I don't going to put myself down anymore.
Do you still
I
play
mean,
its basses, MTD basses?
exclusively, yes. Yep. I have a jet.
5 strings too, I think. Didn't you have some 5s, or are they 4?
I have 4s, 5s, and 6s. I play 6s also. My rule of thumb is the fewer, because I play at other side projects too. My rule of thumb is the fewer instruments in the band, the more strings I use. Because I play as a side project, I play in a local band called Carnaby Street, which is a British Invasion tribute, but we're a trio, a guitar, bass, drums trio playing Beatles, Stones, Dave Clark 5, you name it. So we have no rhythm guitarist. So there's many times when there's a lot of holes in there. So I always use my 6 string with that band. And I can play chords when the guitars when there is a guitar riff that you really have to play. I can't, this is my own opinion. I'm not criticizing anything. It's just my own taste. I hate it when the chords go away. I just don't like that. I'm not a big fan of trios. Even though I play in a trio and I like it, but I have a tendency to play chords where I might strum some chords up top the neck and just thumb the roots to keep the bottom end going, but very simplify the bass part, super simplify, just play roots on a couple to get a couple of chords in the top to back up the thing. So, but with the Fudge, I was playing a 4-string most of the time. I did switch to a 5 when we recorded Spirit of '67. I switched to a 5-string because one of the songs that we play live has kind of a heavy metal part in it, and I need the low B string where there's a big riff that goes down and it goes down in the low end like that because Mark wanted this really heavy metal thing, and the bottom note was a D and it just didn't work. I could have used a drop D, I suppose, but it just didn't. The bottom note was a D, so da 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 da, and coming back up to the upper octave D, and it just didn't work. So I've been using, as long as we play that song, it's our version of "Break On Through." The Doors' "Break On Through," and I've been using a 5-string with the Fudge.
All comes back to what you said before. Serve the song. What is the song?
Serve the song. That is my total philosophy for playing bass. I mean, people might pigeonhole me for thinking that, well, all I do is Tim Bogert, but not really. I mean, famously out there, yeah, but locally I do lots of other things. I also I'm a substitute bass player for I don't even want to call her country/folk singer-songwriter named Loretta Hagen, and I love playing for her. I've done a few tracks on a couple of her on one of her CDs, and very simple style. And it's basically root fifth is what I'm playing, and I love it. So I mean, I can play different styles. I play to the song. I think when they hear I'm covering Tim Bogert, people might get a little bit scared because Timmy, it's really no secret that Timmy did have a competition with the lead guitar players, with Jim McCarty and with Jeff Beck. He considered himself a lead bass player. So, I try to play to the song. I try to play to the song, and that's my goal. Listen, and I also think too, if you were to add to the question you asked me about for older bass players, a lot of the times simple is better, and just listen, listen, listen. Train your ear, train your ear. And I think what's missing? What is missing from this song? And most of the time it's low end, but a little lick right here might go. There's a little hole there. I don't see why the bass can't play that. So I'll add a couple of high notes in here and there,
Then get back down to taking care of business,
and get that back down and take care of it. Exactly. I mean, so I think that's the Paul McCartney in me a little bit, but I thought, because I love McCartney too, and a lot of times that tends to be simple. It may sound complicated because you may be skipping around a little, but it's not technically challenging, shall we say? So again, for the older players, keeping it simple is not a problem. And who knows, you might, the more you practice, the more you can limber up too. You can loosen up.
The simple parts are a little more technically challenging than people think. Are you playing in perfect time? Are you playing with a great time feel? Is your tone consistent? Are you getting those note releases nice and clean? Are you really locking in with the drummer? Are you making the music feel good? This is the stuff I think about.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's 1-5, don't say, oh, it's no big deal. I always say, give me the best 1-5 you've got. Make it.
You're absolutely right. I should have thought of that. You're absolutely right. I mean, I like to think that can come naturally to me after all these years, playing 50 years, but you are correct. And, I have a tendency to play a little bit behind the beat. I like a little bit, but it's a little more oomph when it's a little bit behind the beat. So I tend to play that way. And something else I was going to say, I just forgot. Another thing I think that's very important when you're working with a drummer, not only listen, but watch. Because when you're locking in with a drummer, if you're not paying attention, my philosophy is, by the time you hear it, it's too late. You have to see it coming. I mean, I've played with Carmine long enough to know when I hear the first note of a fill, I know what it's going to be. And if I want to match his rhythm to accentuate his fill, whatever that in a crazy in a cactus thing or fill, I know what he's going to play. And if it also helps for a bass player it helps me greatly as a bass player to have been a drummer, because when I see the sticks come down, I actually almost know exactly what he's going to play. By the speed they come down, you can tell, is it going to be 8 notes, 16th notes, a quarter note triplet? They conduct. You can almost guess exactly what they're going to do. So if you want to try to do a little fill and match them, you have to watch, because you have to see it coming. They always say, watch your right foot. I watch it all. I watch the hands. I watch both feet and the hands. I have a tendency to try to stay back when I'm not singing. I back up so I can look over my shoulder. So I watch too.
What about in the studio? Do you set yourself up so you can see him like?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't. We're in the same room. I sit in the same room with him, and the bass amp's in another room when we were in the studio. The bass amp was isolated. Yeah.
Some gems that you're sharing. This is great. I hope everybody's paying attention to this.
And
what would you be if you were not a bass player? Something outside of music.
Wow. Today.
Or what would you?
I would have had something to do with emergency services, because I would have tried full time, because in the time when I was out of music, I became a volunteer fireman, and I was also believe it or not, in state of New Jersey, the armpit state of New Jersey, we do have a lot of forests here. And I was a district warden for 25 years with the New Jersey State Forest Fire Service. And I loved that, being out in the woods, and I really enjoyed that. And I was also a volunteer search and rescue dog handler too. You go out and look for lost people in the woods and stuff. So if I could have gotten a job for that, I mean, I did do it anyway, but I probably would have tried to do that more professionally, I think.
You're a good soul. You're a good person.
Thank you.
Pete, I could go on talking with you like this all day, but we need to wrap it up. But I thank you so much. Some great stories and some great advice and great information. And I thank you very much. I know our audience has got a lot out of it, as I did personally. And I thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me, John. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Great to have you back. Let's not wait another 9 years before we do it again, eh?
Should I do your the tip of the standard introduction?
Oh, you know my
do you
stuff.
Do you still do that?
Yeah, let me wrap this up and then you can do that, okay?
Okay.
You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. A lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for people mostly over 50 who want to learn to play bass, because I believe we're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. For BassPlayersOnly.com, this is the place for learning bass. Thanks again to our special guest, Pete Bremy, and I will see you all next week, same time, same place. In the meantime, let's play bass.